Thank you so much, Roger. Aloha, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here with you. I'll start with a brief land acknowledgement, acknowledging Hawaii, where we sit as an indigenous space whose original people identify as Kanaka Maoli. The aina on which I sit is in the Ahupa of Waikiki on the Mokopuni of Oahu in the Pai'aina of Hawaii. And I recognize that Her Majesty Queen Liliuokalani yielded the Hawaiian Kingdom in these territories under protest to avoid the bloodshed of her people. I further recognize that generations of Kanaka and their knowledge systems have shaped Hawaii in a sustainable way that allows us to enjoy her gifts today. I really feel privileged to be with you and exploring this topic, which is important to many and valuable to all. First, let me speak a minute about the tough stuff of this time, sort of what brings us here. Obviously, a lot are working from home, homeschooling children. The lack of physical contact with family members, friends, and colleagues has been hard for many. Mental health challenges have also resulted from or been exacerbated by the extended periods of fear about contracting COVID-19, lockdown, worry about losing job, paying rent and mortgage, as well as the anxiety, depression, and grief that can come when we lose people or see loved ones struggle and suffer. People working in vulnerable spaces like healthcare workers are at an increased risk of mental health challenge due to the environment, sometimes long hours without adequate protection. Some during this pandemic have taken to abusing alcohol and other substances as a means of coping. And of course, people who had pre-existing mental health conditions are dealing with increased stress, as well as often the inability to get adequate support or medication. I am on the Council of Allies for the Domestic Violence Action Center, and I know that there have been increased incidents of family and intimate partner violence, which results in mental health conditions as well. DVAC reports that since April 2020, they faced enormous surges with 50,000 client contacts, 10,000 safety plans required, and 25,000 children being impacted. And there have been new tactics and types of abuse: coercion, threat, intimidation, emotional and economic abuse, minimizing, blaming, isolation, and so on, that has been creative and unprecedented. So all of that is pretty grim. That being noted, we here believe that from the mud can grow beautiful lotus, and from suffering can come resilience and post-traumatic growth. So today, my hope is that we will learn about the struggle, yes, but also about solutions, commitments, new understandings, and resilience. As one of our panelists, Allana Coffee, shared in an email to me, the pandemic has been an opportunity she sees for deep reflection and great growth for some, life-changing devastation for others, and varying experiences of both. And so a lot of us are thinking now about how we have coped as community, as nation. And together, I do believe that we can shape a healthier and more thoughtful future and build greater happiness. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Gerald Bush joined the faculty at UH Manoa in August 2019 after retiring from psychiatric practice in Houston for 27 years. He's a professor of psychiatry and associate director of addiction psychiatry. He serves as the forensic psychiatry site director for residency training at the Oahu Community Correctional Center, as well as director of medical education and patient care in the Queens Medical Center emergency department. He is behavioral health patient safety officer at Queens Medical Center as well. He's worked as the staff psychiatrist at the Hawaii Homeless Healthcare Hui in Chinatown Joint Outreach Center from August 2019 until its closure due to COVID. This was a walk-in clinic for the houseless downtown, and Dr. Bush has studied the person-to-person transmission of substance use disorder and the history of models of substance use disorder as a communicable disease. We also have Allana Coffee, PhD, who's the graduate of University of Hawaiʻi, earning her PhD in educational psychology in 2004, and a re-specialization certificate in clinical psychology in 2012. Since 1995, Dr. Coffee has worked either as a consultant, educator, counselor at the Department of Education, the Academy of the Pacific, Kapiolani Community College, Chaminade University, the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa, and Kaiser Permanente. Currently, Dr. Coffee is in private practice, serving adolescents, adults, couples, and parents. She and her husband, Jerry, founded the Honolulu Psychology Collective. And Dr. Coffee is active in several community nonprofit organizations, including the Brain Injury Association of Hawaii, Pilot Club of Honolulu, Hawaii Psychological Association, and she serves on the Diversity, Equity, and Steering Committee. Dr. Jessica Rosenfeld is our third panelist. She is a licensed clinical psychologist, currently practicing at Manakai o Malama, which combines modern and traditional medicine as a part of Community Health Collaborative. She earned her doctorate of psychology from the University of Denver and is a member of the National Register of Health Service Psychologists. She works with a variety of concerns in therapy and assessment, including anxiety disorders, adjustment disorders, and neurodiversity. So welcome to this diverse and thoughtful and experienced panel. And I would like to, I guess, first ask you all to share a little bit of your ideas on what it is that we can all do at this moment in time to look after our own mental health and to help others who may need extra support and care.
I'm sitting here thinking about how big of a question that is. To reuse an overused phrase of the last 18 to 24 months, we are in unprecedented times. However, I think in my experience, my view, there's a lot of things that we can do to take care of ourselves, our mental health, and a lot of that kind of stems from community. And I think in the last year and a half, we've really been deprived, many of us have been deprived of community in the ways that we've come to expect it, in the ways that we've practiced it. You know, in the past, being able to gather in person, we've been gathering in Zoom rooms you know, over phone calls and all these different mediums. And so I think we have to get creative, but essentially we don't need to try to reinvent the wheel. And I think when we, you know, try to respond to the crisis by reinventing the wheel, we get overwhelmed very quickly. And so the short answer would be, how do we do the things that we've always done, but do them in a different way while maintaining our safety? So can we connect with loved ones or community, you know, our community, whatever that is, if it's blood family or chosen family, in ways that are meaningful while staying safe in whatever that means in the current context. So gathering in, you know, rooms like this, making sure that we hold those milestone moments as authentically as we can. Can we gather? I'm thinking about, you know, the holidays coming up. Many people have different traditions in the fall and winter. So can we, you know, gather around our tables, and is there something we need to do maybe to change that? Does there need to be more structure to our meal so that we can all feel connected without, I don't know, missing that in-person experience if that's not possible? And I think by taking the lead and by doing that, you know, we're helping others, we're creating that platform.
You're right, Jessica. I don't know that there can be a short answer at all. I mean, on any given day, there's a different answer for that question. How do you take care of yourself today? Because I think each day is kind of presents itself with new challenges and new opportunities each time. So, but what I have this really ambitious bunch of folks that I see, very high functioning. They hold themselves to such a high standard. And one of the things that I'm noticing in my population of patients is they're so disappointed with themselves for not being able to maintain a standard that was like pre-COVID. And they were already having anxiety about, you know, not performing to whatever standard. I don't know where they got these standards from, but they have such high standards. And now they're still trying to strike that same bar. and everything has changed. So I'm really having to have people, like, it's okay to step back and reassess what is doable and manageable in a safe and healthy way today. It's very different than what it was yesterday, and I'm pretty sure tomorrow will yet change again. So just managing your personal self-expectations.
Well, I know that for me, and I'll jump in, that I think that I've seen families effectively implement sort of a no phone zone where there is a place of sanctuary, and there are times when they are getting their kids and themselves to reconnect with nature, to go old school, to read books, to sit in a hammock, to be in the ocean. And that seems to be an important thing to schedule. I think that there are perhaps, I'm thinking about what is present in Dr. Bush's mental health app, this idea of being able to check in and use opportunities, finding a mentor or finding a partner in health or a presence partner. One of the things that I did during the pandemic lockdown was I got together with my friend Lala online, and we meditated together online. And so kind of thinking about the myriad potential uses of technology, but also limiting and making sure that we find access to non-tech sources, especially if we're learning online, going to school online and communicating with our colleagues. But yeah, what else comes up for you two, or for any of you?
So, oh, Dr. Bush, were you ready to go? I'll wait.
You must be pretty good at reading people. No, I was going to say something, but I don't want to interrupt you either. So I was just thinking, in the social media thing, with finding out the other day about the algorithms that Facebook was using to optimize their performance at basically the cost of human integrity. It seems like that social media isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what we're being exposed to are social media algorithms that engage human attention, but not for any beneficent purpose, but just to sort of further the ends of the corporation that's sponsoring the media. There's not any study that the social media has done to show that it's healthy for people, or no controlled types of studies showing that it's good. And what would be nice would be to hear that they are, that someone twisted their arm to do research to make the social media healthy, to promote health, and not to promote some of the worst things that are going on in our culture right now, which is some of the intense divisiveness and negative self-image and comparison to other people and that sort of thing. So I agree with the idea of taking a break. I like to put my phone down every day for about a minute. I usually last 15 seconds, but then I pick it back up. But I have a period of serenity, and I thought it was particularly terrible when I had an Apple Watch that I use when I went surfing to kind of keep track of things. That was probably the most evil thing that happened to me. But I don't know that there's anything particularly bad in and of itself. The social media is sort of a vehicle, but when it's hooked up to algorithms that are just meant to further the company's interests and not human interests, then we have something potentially terrible. So I do think it's important to insulate ourselves from it, like you're suggesting.
I think is also helpful is this idea of maybe new habit formation. I think of, I know that Dr. Bush was making a joke about setting his phone down for a minute, right? But we can do things like 2-minute meditations, 2 minutes of watching things in motion, 2 minutes of counting our breath, 2 minutes of walking as slowly as possible from one space to the next, 2 minutes of checking in with what we can see, smell, taste, those mindful things, and building those into the day is a way to sort of recalibrate at various turns. And I think that's in keeping with what you are saying, Dr. Coffee, this need to kind of find a way to engage in reflective practice, to check in with ourselves, to feel a boost of energy and a moment of connection, however brief that is. But something that you said makes me also want to ask the question of, frontline communities. You made mention of the fact that we have been dealing with a lot of racial divide and violence, a lot of violence against Black bodies, violence against Asian bodies. And I think that this is a time of continued uncertainty, and we need to think about those conflicts as central to the experience of our young people, especially, even if they are in Hawaii and much of it is happening on the continent. And there is a lot here in Hawaii too, in the way of sort of frontline communities who have been suffering more and to a much greater extent than other communities, right? In terms of not having access to digital tools, not having as much space, and so having large numbers of family members getting sick simultaneously, not having access to healthcare, right? So these frontline communities here in Hawaii and elsewhere have suffered to a much greater extent than others during COVID, from COVID, as well as from violence. And so can you folks all speak about how do we build that community resistance and resilience and grow greater justice and equity for those frontline communities here and elsewhere when it comes to public health? Part of this question is, what investments in public health do you think that we should make, that recognizes the knowledge and gifts of frontline communities, but also the great needs, and how do we listen to these communities and find community source solutions? I know that was a big question, so feel free to tackle any part of it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Jerry. One of my favorite theorists is a man named Yuri Bronfenbrenner, and he talks about the things that Dr. Bush was talking about, whether it's an individual, a household, a neighborhood, a community, a country, and really eventually a planet, a globe, because we're really all connected on this, ball in space. And then this concept of history, I think, is, to me, actually really encouraging, because historically humans somehow find every now and then the way to do a thing right. And we tend to come together and we help each other out. And so we see this pattern again and again historically. So for example, the suicide rate in 2020 has decreased from years in the past. And researchers looked at that and were kind of surprised, because I think they would have thought it would have gone up because there's so much stress and anxiety. So they went back and looked at other events in history and found that whenever the United States in particular has an attack that is a macro system attack where everyone is attacked, then the community tends to come together and get closer to each other. Just have a contraction that's natural. I think the challenge is it doesn't tend to last for very long, but we are seeing that happen here in Hawaii, where there has been a pandemic and people definitely pull together as a community, and we see those suicide numbers decrease at a time like this. And part of that's because there's now permission to talk about pain and anxiety and stress and fear, and it doesn't look weak. I mean, like, it takes a pandemic in some cases to give some people permission to talk about their vulnerabilities, but they are. And so right now we're still feeling some of that, I think, as a community, where people are making space, giving permission, giving support, because it has been a scary thing. My concern is what happens when we start having compassion fatigue and that thing wears off. I just want to know, how do we keep it alive, this thing called compassion and empathy for ourselves as a community, as neighbors, as individuals?
One way I feel like you've just illuminated is, I think, this idea of service, right? A way to avoid compassion fatigue is to take it out of the abstract and sort of materialize it with our work, our actions, our commitments, and helping others. I think there is, I think, a real antidote to loneliness in finding servant leadership during this time, thinking how we can help in small and potentially large ways, right? Are we able to be an accompaniment to elders who are worried, to shop for them, to give our laptops to those in need who are on the wrong side of the digital divide? How can we support workers and mental health professionals by bringing in musubi, or in New York at 8 o'clock, ringing the bells and cheering and everyone clapping, just offering a boost of morale and support and love, right? And those are actions that can make us feel connected, perhaps, to a sense of purpose during this time, that can eliminate the despair that comes, or the fatigue that come. If we keep serving, we become and feel more empowered, and we can find new ways to amplify, to engage in policy transformation. Can we participate in a community gathering talking about public safety and policing? Can we be an advocate? Can we help a child? So I wanted to ask you, what are your favorite things in terms of service and servant leadership? What are the things that you have seen, perhaps, that have made you feel buoyant and optimistic about this time? Do you have stories that you've seen of tenderness and connection and care?
I love the simplicity of that answer. In both of your answers too, in that we know gratitude and expressing gratitude is helpful for our mental health. And so I know for myself, I'm a type A, gold star motivated kind of person. I think about, okay, I'm going to do an act of service. I have to go collect food for everybody on my block. Oh, wow, that's really overwhelming and stressful. You know what? I can't. I have, analysis paralysis, and now nothing happens. And then I feel bad because I didn't do anything. So I think it's what is the small act that you can do in that moment. I love the idea of just saying thank you to the people you see every day. I read an article I think it was in one of the major newspapers, it might have been the New York Times, where they actually looked at most people are no longer working from home in our country. I don't know what the statistics are for Hawaii, but countrywide, nationwide, like most people are not working from home anymore. And so those who are have a bias to think that everybody else is. But I think it's interesting to think about, there are so many people moving through the world, and just that simple act of saying thank you or holding the door. Or maybe you notice that your neighbor's got a flat tire, can you help them out? It doesn't have to be just a response to the big picture, right? But how can we support each other in small little ways?